The Heavenly Demon. Can't Live a Normal Life. By Sanchin. Chapter 46. Battle of Great Warriors. Part 1. The atmosphere turned cold instantly. Battle of Great Warriors, 3 swordsmen representing the families would fight each other, and the family that won 2 times would obtain all the glory. At first, reducing the damage an estate would take might look acceptable. However, those who knew the truth about it would never entrust the fate of an estate like that. Thus, Lawrence's vassals said, "Battle of Great Warriors, that's good. As long as we are certain that we will win, there is no simpler method other than that. The problem is that we need 3 people to fight, and they should at least be strong enough to obtain 2 victories. The opponent is Barco. They have connections with the central government and have even borrowed money from the Golden Bank, so they might have invited some skilled people with their personal connections and wealth. The Battle of Great Warriors is ultimately a battle of personal relationships. And their intention will be to lead the situation from the start to gain power on their side. Also, one needs to have trust to make it work. There was no law that the ones participating had to be from the family. Usually, outside experts were often invited. Thus, Lawrence had no choice but to worry about such variables. In the first place, the difference in power was too high. Like Dmitri, Barco had a 3-star knight, but Lawrence had only 1 2-star knight. Moreover, they hadn't even revealed their full power yet, so how can they accept the battle? Also, Roman, thank you for your help. Barco's siege weapon has been destroyed, thanks to you. For Barco, it is a situation in which they have no choice but to wait longer to capture us, and as time goes on, the situation turns more favorable for us. It is only a matter of time. Even if it is difficult, Lawrence will be able to survive if we choose to sit down, but we cannot know how the situation will turn if we accept your proposal. The Battle of Great Warriors is a disaster. If Barco wins the battle and wants Lawrence's land as a reward, we will have to give it up without even saying anything. The other vassals nodded their heads in agreement. What they were concerned about was the variable. They finally had a chance in this war, so they didn't want to ruin this situation by accepting the battle for nothing. It was understandable. The judgment Lawrence came to was right. However, this was also why they were the docile prey, and despite their fertile lands, they never lived as predators. Roman said, "I understand what you mean. However, as I said, there is no better way than to opt for it, as long as we are sure we will win. From now on, I will give you that assurance. 3 fights, 3 wins. Although it is a fight that emphasizes the existence of 3 people, the Battle of the Great Warriors is actually decided by 2 powerful people. Barco and Lawrence, let's think of the opponent and the number of cases we can choose from. First, Barco. I can think of a 3-star swordsman and an expert from outside as their winning card. As Barco, who spent a lot of money for the flare, they cannot possibly acquire 3 skilled people from outside now. Then, on the contrary, who is there for us to choose? People thought, and only one name came to their mind, Roman Dmitri. I will represent Lawrence in the first match. Whether the opponent is a knight of Barco or an outside expert, I am sure I can win. Then, the other side will surely begin to get antsy, and in the second confrontation, they will have no choice but to send out their best warrior. Also, the Battle of Great Warriors is a battle many witness. No matter how great one is, if they win one battle and lose 2 instead, it is meaningless to continue any further. Furthermore, my man, Chris, will finish it off. Even if his opponent is a 3-star knight, Chris is strong enough to bring us victory. Roman's words felt reasonable. However, it wasn't a perfect operation. If Roman lost to an unknown man, the fight would end without a second thought. Do you think that I will lose? Nevertheless, no one could object to Roman's words. Roman's appearance when he attacked Barco's rear and cut off the head of Berger mercenaries' captain left everyone overwhelmed in his mighty presence. He will win. They were certain of it because of Roman's skills. Then, in that case, we will have 1 win. Isn't that a pretty nice result? Given this situation, if we can tackle them in the right way, we can restore the reputation of Lawrence, which has fallen to the ground, by winning the battle of great warriors. I will not try to convince you anymore. This is all I can do to help. Now, you have to decide. At that moment, everyone's gaze turned to one person, Flora. The previous incidents had given her a voice in the room. Roman had only spoken after he grasped the situation logically. He boldly pointed out the reality, and drew the other party's consent. It was the same today, as well. As all of the vassals went silent, Flora suddenly remembered her conversation with Roman. It's simple, sacrifice for my plan. If the Lawrence family shows their willingness to be the first to bleed and lays down the plates, I will do my best to help you. This is a promise in the name of Roman Dmitri. In order for our conversation to go forward, this promise needs to be made. What he said back then, Roman wished for Lawrence to sacrifice for his plans. For his personal revenge, he hoped for the Lawrence estate to bleed. And, honestly, it hadn't changed even now. On the surface, it looked like he was doing something for Lawrence, but this time, as well, he was forcing Lawrence to sacrifice themselves. He is a dangerous person. Roman's plan has loopholes in it. What if Barco hires a person strong enough to defeat Roman, or if all three warriors are experts from outside? Obviously, Lawrence will be defeated. That is the worst case, and Lawrence will be unable to fix themselves if that happens. Of course, the chances of it happening are slim. Barco not bringing out the flair from the start thoroughly proved the fact that the financial consumption was massive, and they were also putting their everything into this war. Just 2 warriors, Barco's best bet is to prepare 2 strong warriors. Actually, if what Roman said is true, then as he said, it is possible to defeat Barco without much damage through a battle of great warriors. The problem is, Roman is whispering sweet words to us now. An expert like him who defeated Bergo will become the great warrior, so Lawrence should take care of any unforeseen variables. How do I do this? If we choose to sit down, we will eventually survive, even if it takes a long time, but it is clear that it will be a choice that will set Lawrence a step back. Barco and Lawrence, both families are bound to become unhappy. However, if we accept Roman's proposal and win, the glory of victory will come to Roman, and not Lawrence, even if we take minimal damage. It tasted bitter to her. Roman was a sly fox. Knowing that Lawrence wasn't in a situation where they could make another choice, he was using that to his advantage, to get maximum benefit in any situation. Moreover, he wasn't even trying to hide that. Rather, it is ironic that we can trust him because we can see his dark nature. Seriously, Roman Dmitri, you damned bastard. Being thankful that he helped, that was only for a moment. As Roman said, this was a deal. For the benefit of Roman and Lawrence, this was a direct negotiation. Flora said, I am in favor of the battle of great warriors. If there is a way to end this war quickly, I think it is necessary for us to take a gamble. She turned her gaze from Roman, knowing his intentions. That was the only thing Flora could give Roman now. At the same time, somewhere else, the Barco family was in an uproar. That fucking Roman Dmitri showed up. What the hell was he thinking while interfering with our work? Ah. Thwack. Viscount Barco, whose face was flushed red in anger, smashed everything around him. He flipped the desk and kicked the chairs. Although he revealed his violent nature, Viscount Barco's anger didn't subside even a single bit. Ugh. He exhaled harshly. As he sat down on the chair and looked at the gray ceiling of the barack, he could see the reality of Barco. How do I resolve this situation? As the flare was destroyed, we lost our method to end this war in a short time. The Berga mercenaries have lost their will to fight due to the death of their captain, and the risk is too great if we try to rent a flare again. The money borrowed from the Golden Blank is for emergencies. If I use it and the plan doesn't work, then the Barco family will be over for real. It looked bleak. Roman Dmitri, every time he remembered the moment that man had cut off the head of Berga, he felt overwhelmed. At first, it looked like a barbaric plan as they approached from afar, but when Roman's sword flashed, dozens of soldiers died without even getting a chance to scream. Also, at the appearance of Berga, who rushed with enthusiasm, Viscount Barco, who had put his hopes on the A-class mercenary recognized by the entire kingdom, felt everything change. Just how? Why did this happen? There is only one way to resolve this situation: the battle of great warriors. However, there is no reason for Lawrence to accept that. Obviously, there is no need for them to gamble when they can get a sure victory. His mouth felt dry. It felt like his head was clogged up. He didn't know how to change the situation. However, just then, the barracks door opened, and a soldier came in with an urgent expression. "Lord, Lawrence has sent a messenger." Viscount Barco thought, Lawrence must have sent the messenger to show off their lead, as this is the end. Thus, he decided to cut off the messenger's head. It is widely known that a messenger must be spared, not killed. However, Viscount Barco was blinded by his anger. Nevertheless, hearing the messenger's words, he was stunned. Lawrence proposes Barco to hold a battle of great warriors. Battle of great warriors. Hearing that, instantly, he almost laughed. Still, he managed to suppress it. He has been thinking of how to propose the battle of great warriors to Lawrence until now. However, he would never have imagined, even in his wildest dreams, that Lawrence would make the proposal first. Lawrence is digging their own grave. The opponent didn't know about Barco's plans. The Golden Bank had lent them much more money than they had expected. Thus, the remaining money was reserved for situations like the current one. Even if Lawrence had chosen to reject the battle of great warriors, Viscount Barco would have considered renting the flare again. However, there was no need to do that now. The opponent had dug their own grave. Even Roman's presence wasn't a concern anymore. Roman's strength was truly overwhelming, but Viscount Barco's plan to win was something beyond common sense. Thus, he sent back the messenger saying he would think about it, and immediately summoned his people and gave orders. "Go and call him right now. I will send a down payment, so ask him to join as our great warrior." His mind was at peace. The end of the war was already in his sight. In a nutshell, the battle of great warriors will be won by his side within 2 matches. Chapter 47. Battle of Great Warriors. Part 2. Both sides agreed, and the battle of great warriors was decided. Lawrence opened their gates and came out, and Barco came forward with his men as they faced each other. The situation was accomplished within a week of sending the messenger. The judge had come down from the capital, as well. He spoke in a deep voice, with everyone's attention focused on him. "My name is Count Ertz. The battle between the Barco and Lawrence families will be held from this point onward. Also, the 2 families will have to bring up their 3 swordsmen to represent the family and submit the lineup in 30 minutes. The Battle of Great Warriors is a sacred event blessed by Valhalla. Regardless of the outcome, both families must obey it, and if a family violates it, they will be judged according to the rules of the Cairo kingdom." Count Ertz, dressed in a neat robe that didn't match the surrounding land, he was someone sent by the central government to judge this confrontation. In the Battle of the Great Warriors, the authority of the person in charge is extremely important. Therefore, as soon as the 2 sides came to an agreement, the central government was informed, and Count Ertz took steps forward. Tack. Count Ertz sat down at the table that was prepared beforehand. The servants made shade for him, and he sipped wine with a relaxed face as he waited. Both of the sides, Barco and Lawrence, were busy moving. It was to write the lineup. However, watching Barco's movements, Roman suddenly said, "I think we need to change the lineup." "What is that supposed to mean?" Viscount Lawrence was shocked. Lawrence had already thought of a lineup when the Battle of Great Warriors was decided a week back. They planned to place Roman in the lead, Lawrence's knight second, and Chris at the end for the matches. That would finish the battle efficiently. However, Barco's movements were unusual. It is said that the distance from the capital to Lawrence is quite far. Still, in an era when magic devices such as the teleport circle were already developed, it took Count Ertz a whole week to arrive at Lawrence. It was bizarre. It would have been natural for Barco to be under pressure due to the high interest rate as time went on. However, they didn't appear to be impatient in the slightest. It appears that the Barco family deliberately delayed the time. For them, it would have taken time to invite an outside expert. The network of the central government has the power to make it possible. Also, the fact that the confrontation is taking place a week later can be interpreted as meaning that they are fully prepared. Then, they must have decided to send the outside expert as the vanguard. Not really. Roman's gaze turned to Barco's camp. Unlike Lawrence's side, which was bustling, it seemed they had already made their decision. Barco has no intention of sending out an outside expert as their vanguard. Had that been the case, they would have taken action to entice us to send out our strongest warrior, as well. That is the best strategy they could have used, and if that's the case, we need to make a lineup that is the best, based on our enemies. So, what is the solution? Chris will be the vanguard and secure one win for us. After that, I will go second, against the card Barco has prepared. Everyone was stunned. The secret weapon Barco prepared, obviously, he wouldn't be an easy match. However, Roman said he would take the risk. They couldn't understand his decision. Why is he doing this? Lawrence was a bit shocked. Roman risked his life for other people. Unlike Flora, those who didn't know Roman's inner feelings couldn't help but feel moved by Roman's decision. Discount Lawrence said, "I will never forget the grace you have shown to Lawrence. If the Lawrence family wins this battle of great warriors and overcomes the crisis of extinction, we will treat Roman Dimitri as our distinguished guest for the rest of our lives in Lawrence." Except for Flora, everyone showed their respect for Roman. The time has come. Barco didn't think for long and immediately revealed the appearance of the swordsman who would take the lead. "I am Jansen, representing Barco." Jansen, people roared at the name they had heard. Jansen was a 3-star swordsman that Barco was proud of and one of the most talented people in the northeast region of Cairo. On the contrary, Lawrence's representative was humble. "I am Chris, representing Lawrence." Chris, he walked in with a sullen face. People in this place recognized Chris' face. A disciple of Jonathan, who is said to have better talent than Jansen. Also, he was a handsome genius swordsman and the greatest genius in the northeast region. Nevertheless, the problem was that the current battle wasn't a place to compete for future possibilities. Chris may have the upper hand in terms of young age and talent, but at the current level, it was still a match between a 2-star knight and a 3-star knight. Or a difference, it was an area that couldn't be narrowed down merely with swordsmanship skills. Those who live in the realm of common sense naturally thought Chris would have a difficult time. Why did they let Chris go? The talent will die. This is something Dimitri will surely regret. Dimitri's talent will die in Lawrence's fight. Chris was hearing everyone's reactions toward the match. He knew he had a disadvantage here, but he didn't think much while agreeing to go into battle. The reason was simple. "My liege told me to do this. I will do whatever I can to win this match." Roman's words, for that sole reason, he decided to go into battle without a second thought. Among the rankers, there were some masters who overcame the difference in aura and ranked higher. However, they were referred to as exceptions as they were actually special. They were beyond common sense. Roman had said that Chris could defeat a 3-star swordsman by going beyond common sense, as well. Therefore, Chris accepted the situation in front of him without a second thought. The day Chris fought with Kevin, he turned from an insignificant child into a wild dog solely through Roman's teachings. That day, Chris put his blind trust in Roman. He believed Roman is absolute. Even if he died out there, Chris would not regret it. To be strong, one needs to take risks. That is why I left the well and decided to follow my liege. He met Jansen, Barco's master, whom he had heard countless rumors about. He looked strong. So, Chris smiled. If he manages to defeat Jansen, then his choice is right. At that moment, the signal was given. Start. Tack. Who moved first didn't matter. Both Jansen and Chris ran toward each other. Also, the public opinion wasn't wrong. Obviously, Jansen was quick. An aura exploded from his sword, and he swung his sword, intending to kill Chris at once. Whoosh! Due to an instantaneous movement, Chris dodged it. Furthermore, he tried to attack Jansen's gaps, which he found after he stepped to the side, but Jansen didn't retrieve the sword and moved to attack him again. His eyes flashed. The aura on his sword made Chris feel his mouth go dry. He understood he would die the moment he got hit by it. Naturally, Chris quickly stepped back. Rather than giving and receiving attacks properly, he focused on evading his opponent's attacks. "You bastard! How long are you planning on running away?" Jansen growled. He wanted to induce Chris into fighting head-on, but Chris did not lose his composure until the end. 3-star aura versus 2-star aura, a direct confrontation would certainly result in death. Thus, Chris had thrown his pride out the door long back. Even if the appearance of running away was ferocious, he avoided the opponent's attack efficiently. "When I fought against my liege for the first time, he defeated me without even using aura. On that day, when I received a humiliating defeat in front of everyone, I learned one thing: no matter how powerful one's aura is, for the attack to be meaningful, it must hit the enemy. Avoid it. Avoid and dodge it again." As Jansen said, Chris was avoiding all his attacks like a rat. Still, he stabbed his sword toward Jansen whenever he saw a gap. UK. With one hit, blood spilled on Jansen's face. Honestly, it was just a scratch, but the fact that his opponent had attacked him successfully first made it hard for Jansen to accept the truth. "You bastard!" Rumble. Aura emerged on his sword. A 3-star aura swelled. From that point onward, it was not a problem that could simply be solved by avoiding it. The sword, which currently boasted a 3-star aura, split the space, and as a result, an area wider than the sword was swept away. Clearly, the class of a 3-star aura was different. Seeing the aura split the space, Chris took a deep breath. Quang. Quack. And then, he coughed up blood. Even though he defended himself and the aura only grazed him, it felt like his insides were being intertwined. Honestly, this result was natural. People value the distinction highly because even if one fights well 99 times, just being hit once by a higher aura was enough for one to lose. Chris staggered a little. And Jansen, who saw it, pushed ahead. He was moving rather fast as he wanted to end this already, and if things continued like this, it was only a matter of time before Jansen would cut down Chris' throat. Damn it! Chris was different from Roman. Roman had monster-like skills that overwhelmed the opponent, even if he was put in the same situation as himself. However, Chris was someone who hadn't yet grown to the stage where others would refer to him as special. His insides were burning. He thought that maybe he was a bird whose legs got torn while following the stork in front of him. Still, he didn't want to die. This is so messed up. Till now, he hadn't learned anything from Roman. His companions in the Dimitri Knights had laughed at his choice to follow Roman. However, he chose to ignore their words and gazes, and followed Roman. Therefore, he couldn't die in vain. Isn't this too sloppy? If he died like this, Chris wouldn't even be able to face his colleagues in the afterlife. Go beyond the common senses of the world. Roman once asked him, "Why do you use the aura like that?" His common sense had been broken when he learned how inefficient the current methods were, but for some reason, he was clinging to them. Honestly, he had no choice but to do so. His mentor, Jonathan, and even Emperor Alexander, the first aura swordsman, trained in the same way as him. It takes courage to go beyond common sense. And now, Chris, facing Jansen's aura, thought of Roman. The indiscriminate burst of mana cannot be used to reach 100% of the power of aura. Just as my liege showed tremendous power with a single, concentrated burst of mana in the process of destroying the flare, I will also concentrate the power of aura at a single point. Gulp. He gulped at his decision. This was a crossroads for him. In front of him, he could see Jansen running, resembling a reaper. Die. He swung his sword. That action seemed incredible. He had a firm conviction that Chris, knowing his own strength, wouldn't face him head-on. Nevertheless, Chris raised his mana. Rather than exploding it out like others, he was using what he learned from Roman. He was condensing his aura. SRNG. Aura emerged on his sword. However, the size of the aura was small. Jansen smirked, being sure of his victory. However, Kang. When their swords clashed, Chris' aura wasn't destroyed. While burning intensely, it withstood his opponent's attack, and that was a variable Jansen couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. And at that moment, flash. Slash. Mana exploded. In response to Chris's quick attack, his main specialty, the sword moved ahead and blew off Jansen's head. Whack! His blood splattered, and seeing Jansen's head floating in the sky, the eyes of the audience were dyed with astonishment. The winner of the first fight was Chris. Tuck. Roll. Eventually, Jansen's head fell down and rolled on the ground. Those who looked at it were still unable to understand the reality they had witnessed. This is insane. A 3-star swordsman was defeated by a 2-star swordsman? Nonsense. This was beyond common sense. And it was a shocking result, as well. Chris wiped the blood off his sword with a pale face as the soldiers of Lawrence cheered. Whoa! Insane! Chris! 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 There was an uproar. It was odd. The match Barco was expected to win had been won by Chris. Now, they needed just another win. At the thought that they had driven Barco into a corner, the soldiers of Lawrence cheered as if they had already won. Seeing this situation, Viscount Barco was bewildered. Jansen lost. With this, the winning strategy one had thought of has gone down the drain. If Jansen had won, the battle would have been finished with the second match. However, now, the third match is also important. It was absurd. Still, he wasn't worried about winning or losing the second match. It was natural. If he couldn't completely trust the card of victory he held, he wouldn't have spent a huge amount of money on it. Just then, one person stepped forward as if he didn't even care about Jansen's defeat. Appearing in front of people, he put his hand on the sword as he revealed his name with a smile. I am Homer, representing Barco. Homer, hearing his name, Lawrence's soldiers, who had been celebrating their victory until now, were shocked. Homer, did he just say he is Homer? Gasp. Why is Homer here? He was a ranking individual. Valhalla's ranking is based on reliable data, is updated every year, and is also known to people of the continent. Homer was a 4-star swordsman and was also ranked as the 49th strongest in the kingdom. Chapter 48. Battle of Great Warriors. Part 3. The rankings originated from the Valhalla Empire. Nestled at the southern tip of the continent, they created their own culture in the barren and closed-up environment surrounded by jungle. Valhalla is known as the Holy Land of Warriors. The people of Valhalla risked their lives to go to the afterlife, where blessings were given to those who died fighting with honor. In particular, the people of the Valhalla Empire hold a coming-of-age ceremony for children in which they deal with monsters regardless of their gender. They are a fairly aggressive nation where the parents are happy if their children win the fight, even if it means being crippled afterward. Valhalla, they always want to prove their power. They don't just end a battle with who won against whom, but even go so far as to document the results and decide who was the strongest. That was how rankings began. At first, it was simply a culture within Valhalla, but as it became an empire, the culture of the rankings spread throughout the continent. The rankings of Valhalla, they were organized with evidence, and even the Cairo kingdom had their own top 100 listed, as well. Rank 49, Homer, obviously, his appearance was bound to be shocking. I can't believe Barco recruited the wandering swordsman for the Battle of Great Warriors. Viscount Lawrence looked as if he was in despair. The wandering swordsman, no one in Cairo was unaware of his fame. Homer was an A-class mercenary, just like Berga. However, unlike Berga, who built his reputation with a group, he was a one-man army. The reason he was known as the Wandering Swordsman is because he enjoyed fighting the strong while wandering around the kingdom by himself. As a 3-star swordsman, Homer built a reputation through numerous duels and achieved the 49th rank in the rankings. That was his story. Naturally, Viscount Lawrence had to be concerned. Homer recently went against a 4-star swordsman who was known as the 30th ranker. It is publicly known that Homer lost the fight. However, there were rumors that at the end of the duel, he reached enlightenment and progressed one step ahead, 4-star. The news of Homer reaching 4-star struck the kingdom like lightning. Everyone wanted to recruit a 4-star, and thus, Homer's value skyrocketed. That was who Homer was. And now, he appeared here, in the Battle of Great Warriors. Even if it was the Homer of the past, he was enough to make many people walk away. However, the current Homer was like an undefeatable swordsman for them. Instantly, the atmosphere changed. People unknowingly checked someone's face at that time, even though no one had told them to. Yes, they checked on Roman Dmitri. Even in the current situation, he only looked curious. Lawrence's warrior, who will face Homer, will definitely die. That was what people assumed. They thought Roman Dmitri would pull out a white flag and run away. Roman didn't know who Homer was. However, regardless of the reaction of others, he understood Homer was strong. This is fun. He smiled. This is why life is unpredictable. Roman had earlier investigated Barco's actions through the Intelligence Guild and discovered they had borrowed money from the Golden Bank to hire the Berga mercenaries. That was all the information revealed to Roman. With Roman's current ability, he couldn't manage to know about the 30% of the forces Barco had kept hidden, and the day for battle had dawned just like that. And now, Barco showed the hidden 30% power. Honestly, it was more than 30%. Not only did they receive enough money to rent a flare, but they even went ahead and bought a 4-star swordsman. If I had dealt with the demons for information warfare of some sort like this, perhaps my throat would have blown away without even being able to put up a decent fight. However, that will not happen with Barco. Just as the opponent hid the power, they, too, don't know what kind of existence I am. Before the war, Roman made sure he was fully prepared so that there would be no problem even if he met someone strong. He pounded the steel countless times in the forge, and trained himself constantly, as well. Therefore, it was fun, a chance to fight someone strong. If he was strong enough to make people go pale, then he was someone who was suitable to fight him. It was time to introduce himself. However, just as he was about to move forward, someone grabbed Roman's hand. Abstain. It was Flora. Just like Viscount Lawrence, she knew they had fallen into a trap when she discovered Homer would be fighting in the second match. Your opponent is Homer, who is ranked 49th in the kingdom. Besides, he is no simple ranker, he has become 4-star and is considered stronger than the 30th rank in the kingdom. Do you think you can beat someone like that? This plan has failed. You asked Lawrence to make a sacrifice, and now it is our turn to pay the price for that variable out there. So, step back. If you abstain, you get to keep your life. And I will earnestly pray that Lawrence's knight will win a victory in the next duel. Flora, her feelings for Roman were complicated. Although Roman was someone she loathed for his selfish desires, she couldn't let the only person who helped Lawrence die here. This is a battle they will be defeated in. Since Homer had no reason to spare Roman, Flora wanted him to back out beforehand. Even if Roman surrendered with a white flag, no one would blame him. However, I don't want to. Roman put her hand away. And just when he was about to walk again, Flora cried out, "Then you will die." This is something Lawrence has to handle. There is no reason for you to risk your life here. Clench. He halted his steps and looked at Homer. That man, his attitude showed that he thought he was the best. From the first time Roman saw Homer looking down on others, his desire to win became even more intense than it originally was. That's my choice. I don't need to explain everything to you, so do not get in my way from now on. He spat that out. He didn't know what expression Flora had. His relationship with her ends here. Roman stepped ahead. Facing Homer, who seemed interested in the situation, he said, I am Roman Dmitri, representing Lawrence. The declaration of a warrior. Now, he could not step back. Flutter. The flag signaled the start. There was no aggressiveness like in the first fight. Neither Homer nor Roman rushed in and waited for the opponent to make the first move. I can't believe I have to deal with this little one. Homer wasn't too interested in this fight. He heard rumors. The ridiculed fool of Dimitri's family had subjugated the blood Fang and intervened in this war, as well. Now, he was someone who had to be evaluated differently. If he had the power to destroy the flare, then he would have to be a 2-star swordsman who can use aura. However, that didn't attract Homer's attention. If it wasn't for personal reasons, I would have challenged Fernando right away. Fernando was a 4-star swordsman. He is the person known as the gatekeeper that guarded the 30th rank. Homer, who was defeated in the fight with that man, had now risen to the level of 4-star. Now, he had the strength to face Fernando. Homer was preparing for it, but due to the request of the mercenary guild to which he belonged, it got delayed. Homer, I agreed to take the large sum of money that comes with participating in a single battle in the battle of great warriors of 2 families. I know you were looking forward to the fight against Fernando, but consider our position. The opponent is the Lawrence family, who doesn't even have a 3-star swordsman. It will just be a bland fight for you. There was no reason to refuse. Homer didn't receive a proper mission after getting his A-class mercenary badge. He just wandered around hoping for skilled people to come and fight him, and would take any funds he collected to the guild he was in. It was a give-and-take situation. Homer does what he wants, and the mercenary guild uses his name. As Homer reaching 4-star was a hot topic, he couldn't turn away from the earnest request of the guild leader. However, it was really boring, the fact that he came all the way to the outskirts to deal with someone he hadn't even heard about. Let's just end this quickly. He had no intention of doing his best. He would just do enough for the payment he had taken. Homer slammed the ground and swung his sword at the opponent. Swish! It was swift. For Homer, it was a light movement, but it was nothing like that for normal people. Rankers were beings considered out of the world. People thought Roman wouldn't be able to handle the attack and would get his throat slashed. However, Kong! The attack was blocked. When Homer immediately took a step ahead and launched another attack, Roman responded without stepping back. Kong! Cocking! In an instant, they exchanged blows. Homer thought that a 3-star was enough to take down his opponent, but Roman showed no signs of being pushed back even when his sword was coated with aura. It was absurd. Roman's sword had such a weak aura that he doubted if it was truly aura, but even that was blocking his attacks. Look at this. It was strange. Seeing the bizarre situation, his interest in Roman arose. He was curious about how Roman developed his aura, and for the purpose of testing, Homer raised his aura even more. Still, his power wasn't exhausted. With this kind of power, he decided he could take down Roman. SRNG. Rumble. His insides were boiling, it was the mana raging, and then, aura exploded on his sword. It was a skilled 3-star swordsman's aura to end Roman's life in an instant. It was an aura different from Jansen's. While Jansen was a swordsman who managed to reach 3-star, Homer was someone who had gone beyond 3-star. At that moment, everyone there looked wide-eyed. Due to Homer's current appearance, they thought Roman was done for. And at that moment, Homer shouted ferociously. And when Homer looked at Roman, he just saw Roman staring at him with cold eyes. Try stopping this. Flash. My vision, that was Homer's last thought. The thought of fighting a 4-star swordsman was exciting. His blood boiling, Roman thought he would finally have a proper fight after a long time. However, the reality was different. Homer didn't use his full strength in the fight, and although it could be because he didn't know his opponent, it was still disrespectful. I am happy, though. He could understand Chris' situation, both parties had their own reputation. However, Roman's opponent kept ignoring him despite knowing he was different from his past. That was something Roman couldn't understand. In a situation where they risk lives, how can they put blind trust in their skills when they don't even know their opponent? He didn't feel good. Roman had fully prepared for the match. The infernal god art was laid as the foundation for the heavenly demon god art, and now it was possible for him to use the first 3 moves of heavenly demon sword technique. Nevertheless, he was still lacking. Even though he was in a situation where he hadn't recovered even 10% of his actual power, Roman was constantly training to grow. However, Homer looked down on him. Roman didn't come here to obtain other people's approval. He was here to fight Homer as a swordsman, and to get his revenge on Barco. Remembering the furnace where he made his weapon, he changed his mind. If the other person looks down on me, then I don't need to bother drawing out the battle. Hey! Roman raised his mana. It was different from his opponent's. Roman's mana was like a gentle wave, and when it wrapped around the sword, it even absorbed the mana in the surroundings. Heavenly Demon Sword Technique, 3rd move. The Heavenly Demon Sword technique has no form. Whoever wields the sword does an anomalous attack that cannot be predicted by the opponent, and its power increases multiple times depending on the user's movements. It is a martial art that conquered all of Murim. Roman chose to do his best. If Homer survived this attack, he would acknowledge Homer. Try and stop this. Flash. And then, the sword was swung. That was the end. Homer didn't respond. He could only stay in the realization that Roman was attempting an attack. Like that, his sword and body were split simultaneously. Whack! With just one hit, just as it was with Berga, the match was decided in an instant once again. Chapter 49. Battle of Great Warriors. Part 4. Chris' victory was undoubtedly shocking. Gazing at Jansen's head roll on the ground, people accepted the possibility of it happening as Chris was considered one of the most talented swordsmen. Isn't Chris a disciple of Jonathan? It was impossible to understand with common sense, but it seemed possible when they thought about Jonathan's teachings. However, the true problem was the next match. Chris and Jansen's match somehow made sense, but Homer's build and appearance made people feel like victory would belong to the other side now. Homer wasn't a being who could simply be referred to as strong. He was a person who had been on the rankings even before he achieved 4-star, and now, the people of Cairo thought that he was worthy of being above the 30th ranker. He was referred to as the Hope of Cairo. However, today, he died. Without even being able to display his 4-star aura, which he was famous for now, Roman split his body and sword simultaneously. How did this happen? Am I seeing an illusion right now? People were truly astonished. Obviously, they had thought Roman Dmitri would die in this battle. However, even though he knew his opponent was Homer, he did not step back from the fight and went in bravely. Honestly, the audience had thought there was not even a 1% chance that Roman would win. Thus, they could only keep their mouths closed as if someone had sewed them. Ignoring the fact that it was an important battle that would decide which side would win and which would lose. They could only blink their eyes several times to check the reality in front of them. However, there was just one person who was indifferent, Roman. He took the reality in front of him for granted. A brat who didn't even reach the peak of his state was acting all arrogant. Homer's aura was strong. For Roman, he was the strongest among all those he had encountered in the Salamander continent. However, Roman's fundamental evaluation wasn't based on this world, it was based on his previous one. The Murim he lived in was filled with masters. Unlike Murim, where Baek Jung-hyuk had decided to die despite being the heavenly demon, this place felt inefficient. Homer's attack, while people admired the aura he displayed, Roman only sighed at it. Thus, the fight ended. Roman was sure of his victory. Homer wasn't even a worthy opponent for Roman, and his burning desire to win the battle was soon extinguished. Roman said, "Judge, please declare the results." And then, people acknowledged the reality. Roman's victory after Chris meant that the Lawrence family had already secured the qualifications to win. The Battle of Great Warriors consisted of 3 battles, and whoever won the most was deemed as the winner of the Battle of Great Warriors. Gulp. Chris gulped seeing that. While he was watching the battle between Homer and Roman, his palms were drenched with sweat. These are the true skills of my liege. Honestly, he hadn't fully grasped the power of Roman yet. When the match started, he understood that Roman's strength had obviously changed from when he first fought him. Back then, Roman wasn't someone who could use aura, but despite Chris using aura, he suffered a defeat against Roman, who dealt with him purely using only sword techniques. After that, he realized the truth: Roman was dealing with mana in a different manner, and unlike his image as Dimitri's fool, he had already reached an unbelievable level. However, the problem wasn't just him reaching an unbelievable level. Was his growth limited to the strength he used to defeat Chris? Or was there something else he had not revealed back then? Chris didn't find answers back then. However, a while back, Chris saw the true face of Roman Dimitri. Seeing dozens of soldiers get slaughtered by him single-handedly, he understood, if Roman was in front of him, anything was possible. Honestly, he was still a bit surprised when he saw the 2-star mercenary, Berga, taken down with a single slash. However, when he saw Homer's 3-star aura cut down, even if it wasn't 4-star aura, he realized how overwhelming Roman and the current situation were. Even Chris, who thought he knew Roman, was shocked by the situation. Did my liege have such skills when he fought me? Or did he achieve rapid growth after fighting me? I cannot even begin to understand this. In the former case, the Lord was clearly not strong enough to overwhelm Homer, and for the latter, the time limit is too short for growth like this. Then, how the hell did this happen? His mind felt complicated. He didn't even dare to try and guess it. In 2 months, most humans couldn't even express a 1-star aura. However, in front of him, Roman had grown beyond that standard. Even after defeating Chris, he developed himself. It seemed as if he had gone through body reformation. And by showing off his brilliance, he stepped into a realm that Chris hadn't even dared to enter. Honestly, his growth was so rapid that it couldn't be found even in Murim. It was only possible because Baek Jung-hyuk, the strongest heavenly demon in the world of Murim, was in Roman's body. Thus, people not being able to understand Roman's growth made sense. Huff, Chris took a deep breath. After his victory against Jansen, he thought maybe a day would come when he could overcome the wall known as Roman, as well. However, it was an illusion. Now that he had confirmed the true skills of Roman, Chris felt a sense of awe and suffocation. I guess my thoughts were premature. He always thought of being loyal only until he surpassed his liege, but now he realized that his thoughts were too hasty. Nevertheless, the fight was over. Obviously, it was Lawrence's victory. There was nothing else to see, but as Count Ertz, who was in charge of this battle, was there, it was his duty to ensure the victory was announced and the matters were handled properly. The Battle of Great Warriors usually has to go through 3 battles for it to end. Since the winning and losing sides have already been decided with this match, both sides may send out a new warrior under them, if they want to. It was leeway for the loser. Since there was no reason to waste his manpower in a battle the other side was sure to win, he gave Barco a chance to keep their pride. However, Viscount Barco couldn't come to his senses despite those words. From the moment Homer's body fell and began to bleed out, Viscount Barco felt like the sky had fallen on him. It's over. His mind went blank. For his dispute with Lawrence, he did his best. He deliberately tampered with documents to induce a fight with the Lawrence family. And he spent huge amounts of money in the process and used his connections in the central government to summon Count Ertz here. And what was worse was that all that money wasn't even Barco's. Unlike Lawrence, who had fertile lands, Dimitri, who collected money due to their mines, Barco wasn't a wealthy family, and all the money was borrowed from the Golden Bank with collateral. Barco's legs trembled. He couldn't comprehend what had just happened. Even if he ignored the collateral, he knew the interest he would have to pay would be astronomical. How the hell was Homer defeated? Homer is a 4-star swordsman. Unlike the rumors around the Northeast, he is a real swordsman with good skills who wandered around fighting with stronger people. Him losing the battle doesn't make sense. This is clearly a conspiracy of the mercenary guild. They must have sent someone disguised as Homer, and that fake guy was killed by that Dimitri's fool. Barco ignored the reality in front of him. He didn't want to believe it because he knew the price he had to pay would be huge. Viscount Barco's eyes trembled anxiously despite seeing Homer's face. Lord, we need to send a warrior out there. A knight spoke carefully. According to the plan, a 2-star knight would go third. However, now that Barco's 2 best warriors got killed, they couldn't sacrifice another knight. Nevertheless, Viscount Barco didn't bother about his pride and honor. We cannot lose our last hope. Send Benson out now. As he is the one who dishonored Barco at the banquet, we will give him a chance to make up for it right now. I understand. The knight withdrew with a stiff expression. He knew this act was nothing but throwing his men to the wolves. Benson was being asked to go out and die. Still, no one would talk back. At the last banquet, Benson, who was a knight, had argued with Kevin. It was fine that he was laughing at Dimitri, but the problem was that after that, he was unilaterally beaten by Roman in front of everyone. And that turned into a gossip topic for other nobles. It was a situation that showed the difference between Dimitri and Barco. Naturally, Benson was punished. And today was his last chance to redeem his mistakes. To continue living as a knight of Barco, despite knowing that he might lose his hand or even his life, he had no choice but to walk onto the stage. I am Benson, representing Barco. It was the last battle. As Benson stepped ahead, there was a bit of a commotion on Lawrence's side. Benson was a knight who wasn't much strong. Lawrence's knight was scheduled to go in third, and they were sure of this victory. However, suddenly, an unknown figure stepped out. I will deal with him. He was small. Wearing a helmet that didn't suit him, he looked up at Roman with a determined expression. Yes, it was Kevin. Lawrence's knight spoke sternly at the sudden interruption. What kind of role does this ordinary soldier want to take? Even if the opponent is a man who isn't much strong, he isn't someone you can deal with. The Battle of Great Warriors is a sacred place for the honor of Lawrence. As you are one of Sir Roman's soldiers, I will let your words slide. Thus, step back. Kevin's actions were too sudden. According to military law, he could be punished, as well. Lawrence's knight was right in his own sense. However, Lawrence's lord, observing the situation, just watched it happen silently. Viscount Lawrence, Flora, as well as everyone else, they all knew that Roman Dimitri, who led them to victory, had the authority to accept the request of Kevin. Sigh. Roman looked at Kevin. He's truly foolish. Indeed, his actions were foolish. Although Kevin was developing quite rapidly, fighting against a sturdy opponent in the Battle of Great Warriors was a risky choice. Nevertheless, Kevin said he wanted to fight. Whether it was a choice to repay Benson for what he had gone through at the banquet, or if he was risking his life to prove his worth to Roman, it didn't matter to him. There was only one thing Roman was sure of: go. Despite how foolish it was, he liked Kevin's choice. In the world of survival of the fittest, no rights were granted to those who suffered defeat. At the banquet, people were speaking about Roman giving back a perfect reply to Jansen's actions, but behind the scenes, they didn't take Kevin, a knight who had to be protected by his lord, seriously. Moreover, Kevin was different from Chris. Thus, the people didn't think Kevin could do anything for his liege. Therefore, he had to take a step forward. And after standing by Roman's side, he understood what Roman valued. Kevin said, I will be back soon. Seeing Kevin move toward the stage with a ferocious face, the people of Lawrence couldn't stop him. Chapter 50. Battle of Great Warriors. Part 5. Benson wasn't the kind of person who believed in karma. Even after doing all sorts of crazy things, thanks to his father, who was a knight, he was able to walk on a solid path and turn into a knight under Barco. That was why he was proud of the fact that he was a knight. He was someone who enjoyed power and did his best for Barco. What he did to Kevin was an expression of his loyalty. Usable to suppress his rising pride, he ridiculed his opponent even though he didn't know what would happen due to that. Is this karma? His future seemed dark. He had much experience with Roman Dimitri as he served directly under Anthony Barco. Although his position within the public had changed due to the incident with Blood Fong, Benson didn't believe the rumors. Well, it was a reasonable thought. Thinking of the Roman Dimitri he saw and experienced with his own eyes, he thought crossing a line would be fine, as well. However, the reality was much different. Roman Dimitri cut down Homer with a single slash. As he watched the blood gush out of Homer's body, Benson felt goosebumps rise on his skin. I made a severe mistake. What if he had known the true face of Roman? Benson would have never dared to even lay a finger on Kevin and would have tried to stick with Dimitri, not Barco. Nevertheless, the deed was already done. His life as a knight of Barco shackled him, and what he did came back to him like a boomerang. Viscount Barco ordered him to go on the stage. As he couldn't refuse it, he was now a mere death row prisoner. Fuck. People were looking at him, but no one cheered for him. In their eyes, he was already a corpse. I am Benson, representing Barco. He struggled to calm his trembling voice. What kind of man will they send for the battle? He knew that Lawrence had a 2-star swordsman. Obviously, the moment he entered the stage, Benson would undoubtedly die. Oh, God. Please save me just one more time. Just then, a person from Lawrence's side walked onto the stage. His face was familiar to Benson. He had a small physique, as well. Seeing him come up on the stage, Benson could hardly hold back the laughter in his mouth. He is my opponent? He was sure, the one in front of him was the boy soldier he had beaten at the banquet. Seeing him stepping up, Benson felt he had been given a chance to live. God. Thank you very much. He thought he would live through this. In his eyes, Kevin looked like easy prey. Swish. The final battle began. Benson was relaxed. The flag was moved to signal the start of the fight, but he showed a relaxed attitude instead of rushing ahead. I doubted my eyes at first. No matter how they decided who to send, I didn't think you would be sent in as their last warrior. Grin. He laughed. His lips constantly curled up, unable to hide his happiness. Well, you must have wanted revenge. However, whether you came in intentionally or not, you have now been abandoned by the Lord you serve. Think about it, if you were the one who had the authority to decide the final warrior, would you have let yourself come out? Of course not. This means you are of little use, and your future has been decided. Grip. He picked up the sword. Kevin only continued to watch Benson silently. He moved the legs to a reasonable distance and pointed the sword at Benson. Cheeky bastard. Was it because of the relief that he would live? He felt his pride hurt seeing Kevin's actions. Kevin slammed the ground and rushed for his opponent in the blink of an eye. Die. Tap. Benson's movements were slow. Because of the previous confrontations, in which powerful people fought, the movements of Benson didn't stand out. Nevertheless, no one doubted that the winner would be Benson. It was because Benson's opponent was Kevin, who could be seen as a soldier who had started training only recently, and Benson had a physique that seemed like it could overwhelm Kevin at any given moment. The difference was obvious to the audience. As Benson swung his sword with a heavy movement, Kevin turned his head slightly and dug into his opponent's arm. Pat. Blood dripped onto the floor. Kevin's cheek had a slight cut, but he didn't care about that and aimed for Benson's chin while swinging the sword from the bottom toward the top. The area under the chin is never protected by armor. Thus, it was quite threatening. Benson raised his arm to block the sword while simultaneously attacking Kevin in the stomach with his other arm. Whack! Benson blocked Kevin's attack. Kevin couldn't penetrate the black steel without aura, and his expression distorted slightly at the hit to the stomach. However, he didn't step back. Without a single groan, Kevin swung his sword toward the opponent's gap, once again, as if his stomach wasn't in pain. Honestly, Kevin's swinging speed was much faster than anyone else had expected. The muscles that had been trained by farming and doing chores exerted unnatural strength. Thus, the place between Benson's forearm and torso was cut sharply. Slash. Quack. Benson gulped back his groan. It was an unexpected counterattack. Then, Benson slammed his opponent's body. Kevin bounced back, and as he rolled on the ground, Benson instantly jumped right in and slashed toward his opponent. Die. Whack. Due to the brief difference, Kevin quickly evaded, smashed his sword into the ground, and quickly used the repulsive force he gained from that to reduce the distance between Benson and him. It looked like he didn't want any more clashes and wanted to end the battle quickly. Kevin and Benson, as there was a physical difference between a boy and an adult, their attack and speed were naturally different. Kevin instinctively knew that he would have to move faster and end this while sticking to his opponent, so he never lost his focus, even when his cheek was cut and he was thrown to the ground. Kong. Cock-a-king. Their swords collided. Obviously, Benson overwhelmed his opponent due to his physical advantage, but he couldn't make any decisive attacks. You bastard. Benson's face flushed red. His self-esteem was hurt. His opponent was nothing but a kid. Against him, who had the title of a knight, Kevin was still just a child. Yet, he couldn't end the battle? His stomach churned due to his fury. He initially tried to end this fight by making him unconscious, but after looking at Kevin now, his eyes became red with anger, and he lost his rationality. I will definitely kill him. He changed his mind. Even if it resulted in him getting hurt, he wanted to punish Kevin, the boy who didn't realize who he was dealing with. How dare you? Swish. Kevin titled his head as Benson swung the sword with all his might. The moment when the whispers around him went silent, Benson rushed ahead. In a position where he had given up his defense to some extent, he launched a series of attacks like a storm, and Kevin had to step back and forth to not get hit by them. Each time their attacks clashed, Kevin's body staggered. Even if his sword was blocked, Benson wouldn't stop and kept pushing Kevin further backward. Now, the results of the battle were clear to most of the audience. It would be Benson's victory. Another result wasn't as expected. That was because, in the current situation, the difference in the physical strength of the warriors was quite vast, and Kevin couldn't have grown so much in 2 months that he would be able to defeat a knight. Kong. Kevin's arm bounced back, unable to handle his opponent's strength. Benson, who noticed it, decided to make a follow-up attack. Swish. His sword even cut the wind. Truly, it was a desperate crisis. Seeing Kevin try to attack back, Benson decided to end this. A sword like that cannot pierce my armor. In a battle like this, the value of armor couldn't be ignored. However, Benson's eyes widened as if they would tear apart just before his sword cut through Kevin. Slash. SRNG. Kevin's sword, which was glowing red, cut through Benson's armor, and dozens of blood drops splashed in front of his eyes. Roman once said that using ghost illusion demonic martial arts one was a way to grow faster than any other technique if one could handle the pain and suffering that came from it. Yes, the ghost illusion demonic martial arts inhabited Kevin's mind from the day he cut his hand off. Kill. 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 That fucking bastard is hurting you right now. Get revenge against him now. The ghosts of the ghost illusion demonic martial arts were whispering that to him. Actually, they were all just hallucinations. The ghosts of the ghost illusion demonic martial arts don't actually exist but still confuse one's mind. Thus, Kevin looked at Benson with burning eyes. The physical pain was nothing to him. Even when Benson's fist hit his stomach, it was nothing compared to the pain of cutting his own hand off. He endured it. He suppressed the pain and narrowed the distance between him and his opponent. Avoid. Be careful. His instincts said that. It seemed like his opponent would swing the sword from top to bottom. Kevin believed the ghost's words and avoided his opponent's attack with a short delay. Benson's sword passed right in front of his eyes. In a situation where he could die due to the slightest carelessness, Kevin felt alive. I want to be more useful to my liege. Chris was chosen as the first warrior. Naturally, Kevin felt envious when he looked at Chris, who took down a 3-star knight. Obviously, he made up his mind to follow Roman before Chris did, and he hated the fact that he couldn't be better than him. His family had received favor from Roman. However, what did he do for Roman? Just like Chris, he wanted to gain Roman's trust and carry out his orders faithfully. However, all he could do till now was see Benson insult Roman and then get beaten up by him. Maybe it was a feeling of inferiority. Maybe it could be considered as too much loyalty. However, nothing changed the fact that Kevin wanted revenge now. He wanted to rip off the mouth of Benson with which that bastard dared to insult Roman. He wanted to be a useful sword for Roman Dmitri. Just then. Swish! Benson initiated an attack. He was certain of his victory. He believed that he could win easily and jumped ahead. However, that was a mistake because he did not know Kevin's actual skills. Ghost illusion, demonic martial arts. Kaka. Kill him. A red light shone from his sword while consuming a bit of mana. It was something he could use only for a fleeting time, but during that time, Kevin had enough power that he could even cut down steel. Slash. Thus, Benson's armor was cut. Naturally, the skin behind the armor was also cut, and red blood splashed into his eyes, while the majority of it gushed and dripped down. Benson was stunned. His expression turned to one that showed how much pain he was in, and he hurriedly swung his sword toward Kevin to get a chance to live. However, contrary to what any normal human would do, Kevin did not avoid it. Naturally, his flesh on the shoulder was cut off due to the attack. Benson's sword raged at his body, but in return, his chest was torn open by Kevin's attack. Kevin didn't care about it. Despite the flesh on his shoulder being cut down more horribly with each of his moments, in Kevin's vision and thoughts, there were only Benson's wounds. Once upon a time, Kevin was someone who was terrified of even having a slight cut on his finger. However, the child who once lived under the love of his parents had now grown up completely differently due to the challenges he faced in his life till now. Kevin's expression turned even more ferocious. And for a moment, Benson's eyes met Kevin's. Instantly, his face was turned into one that contained fear due to realizing what a mistake he had made by ignoring Kevin. He tried to move away, but Kevin attacked even more cruelly. Whack! Aha! Benson screamed. Now, he had no more power to use mana. He tried to fight his physical strength, but Kevin got on top of the collapsed Benson and crushed his upper body. Then, he grabbed his sword and stabbed and slashed toward his opponent ferociously, not even giving him the chance to stand up. Obviously, Kevin's arm was also in pain due to the wounds he had suffered, but he didn't care about it. All that mattered was to kill the opponent. Whack! 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 Cough! Each time Kevin's sword was pulled out of his body, blood splattered everywhere around them. Benson, groaning while holding back the blood in his throat, struggled to push Kevin away. Nevertheless, his pathetic hands couldn't stop the onslaught. Even when he was using his hands to push Kevin away, Kevin didn't stop attacking. Finally, Benson's body shook at a certain moment, and seeing no reaction even after stabbing him multiple times, Kevin lifted his head. Quack! Quack! Benson's condition was so horrible that one couldn't even call him human anymore. And obviously, Kevin was the winner of the final battle. Everyone held their breath, seeing Kevin's appearance. He resembled a demon. Even if it was a fight in which the death of the opponent was natural, some of them could only keep their mouths shut, seeing the cruelty of Kevin. Kevin stood up while staggering. His face was stained with blood, and blood was dripping down from his torn shoulder, but he walked as if he hadn't suffered any wounds. Everyone's attention was focused on him. One step at a time, people followed his movements, After walking for quite a while, Kevin arrived in front of Roman. As Roman was looking down at him, Kevin looked like a child wanting to be praised. "I am back." Hearing those words, Roman said, "You did well, Kevin." Those words were enough. Hearing them, Kevin smiled brightly, as if he had won over the entire world. The fight was over now. The battle between Barco and Lawrence had finally come to an end. Everyone had assumed Barco would win, but the results they saw today were good enough to shake the entire Cairo kingdom. 3 wins out of 3 battles, obviously, it was Lawrence's win. And the one at the center of it was unmistakably Roman Dimitri.